right, so let me do this. Recording, turn off any of these. Should be good there. I'll go ahead and hit start recording. Just get that going. So what's up, everybody? I was thinking to get a meeting together just so we have a little bit of discussion with people who are going to be a part of the race and care about these types of topics. Because after the last race, of course, I don't know about you guys, but it's starting to get kind of exhausting having to figure out what's the right call and stuff. And I just want to put stuff in, I don't know, some sort of guideline so we can all kind of agree, hey, this is how we should be kind of approaching the world race. And it's just been more like me doing the world race for over all these years. It's more of just letting people do their thing and just kind of record keeping. But before we get into that, I want to make sure I have the dates correct that we think it's going to be. I mean, on the really early side, possibly March 25th, right? That'd be like the absolute earliest. You guys agree with that?
According to us, I'd say it's like 90% March 25th is the patch and Savage is April 1st.
Okay.
That's kind of where our mindset is.
People I've spoken to, they think it's gonna be
April 1st for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's the one I'm going to be aiming for, and what I'm going to be planning for is that day, which is wonderful because that is the Monday before I go out of town, that Thursday. So you guys got to kill it. That's it.
All right, hopefully it lives more than one day.
Yeah. Expectation-wise for me is that it's either going to be close to doing a 2-day or it's going to be a 2-day fight. Like it's
yeah, like if they ramp up from the previous tour, I think it's gonna be kind of cursed because like my speculation is you're gonna get to like midnight when you want to go to bed, and it's like if we go to bed we're not world first, but if we don't go to bed we're up until like 6 a.m. I have a feeling it's gonna be kind of that.
World first too.
Yeah, so it could be cursed, but we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to see what they do. I mean, I don't know what Square's thinking right now. They haven't really communicated too well, unless if you guys have heard communication, I haven't, about the difficulty. And like, if they thought they did it way too easy and they're going to ramp it up or not, or it's going to be pretty much the same thing. They always ramp it up a little bit on the second fight, but I don't know at this point. I do also think the game's kind of in a lull. So they might be trying to do something to get a little bit more attention to the game, which could be increasing the difficulty of this fight. I don't know. But okay, I'm going to write down the first and possibly a 2-day race if we get lucky, I guess, depending on your perspective.
I think it's a safe bet, all things considered. I mean, we have to assume there's going to be some semblance of like respecting the history that the second tier is going to be substantially more difficult. The real question that remains is whether we're going to see anything resembling a DPS check, which has the capability of adding like quite a bit of time, especially if there's a door boss. But either way, you definitely cannot have a safer bet than at least like a day and a half, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, and I guess the other thing, is there any other race type content coming out this patch, or is it just like Savage? They're not going to put a Criterion in, they're not going to put a House of the Dead or anything like that in, right?
I heard there's a 48-man raid.
48-man raid. Yeah, it says raid group content for 48 players in a new field operation.
That should be 725 at least, right?
Yeah,
that will not be 7.2.
I couldn't imagine they would do that. That would be such a... I mean, they've made bad decisions before, but it seems like an obviously bad decision to do that. So, yeah, it looks like Eureka Baja content, and they're just going to have large-scale boss battles and raid content, like maybe similar to what we saw in Baldesion Arsenal. Is that right? BA? Yeah?
DRS would be...
You think DRS more likely?
Yeah, I think DRS.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep an eye on that. I don't know if, I'll do anything for it, but until we get more details on it, which I hope in the next live letter we will, then I'll figure out if we do anything for it.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if you're gonna like do a world race for DRS, I feel like max you're gonna have 3 teams in that. But
Yeah.
I mean, it could still be fun if that many even show up. I don't know. It's not
Maybe
something.
true.
need to be a
region.
race, really. Like just having coverage of it happening in a
Mm-hmm.
non-competitive way could still potentially be cool because DRS was really cool at the end of the day.
It was, yeah. Yeah, I'm hyped.
Yeah. Okay. And I have the ability to trim down everything and make it into kind of like a very light production. So that might be what we would do if we want to just cover it just to cover it. But all right. So, anyways, this also caused a shitload of comments and stirred up a whole bunch of stuff unintentionally, of course. But ideally, usually we haven't had really any major guidelines. Just kind of went with what the community thought was right, and when things happen, and that's still going to be kind of the same way, I think, in how I use the leaderboard and track the leaderboard. And I do want to separate the thought of what is it clear on stream for the stream event that's happening versus just the overall leaderboard of what I'm normally tracking. And so I still want it to be pretty light in the overall leaderboard, to where we're just kind of tracking it, but we want to make sure that there at least some sort of confidence within the clears and everything else. And I know there's been a lot of thoughts on it. I don't know how many of you guys have read the thoughts I put on guideline-wise for the last time that we went through this, but is everybody still kind of on board with a lot of those make sense? Or is there anything that people had issues with?
Do you have something that like could remind me of exactly like the main
Absolutely.
points?
I have a website, mocktalk.org, where I rarely post stuff unless if I need to communicate something that a Blue Sky or Twitter post can't do. So yeah, let me put this in the meetings discussion channel that I have just right above this channel. Let's see if that came across clearly. All right. So all rulings by Square Enix in terms of bans and achievement removals will be recognized and be removed from the Mock Talk leaderboard. So this basically means if Square Enix comes out and they're like, "Hey man, we're banning you because we believe you're cheating." If we go with past rulings and how Square Enix has kind of handled it, they've only done that once, right? And I don't know that everybody agreed with that decision, but I feel like it's safe to at least just go with what they decide on in those kind of cases. Do you guys have any issues with at least that statement?
I think that's fine. If Square Enix doesn't recognize it, why should the rest of the community, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if anyone does decide they have a thought on it, let me know. But going on to the second one, at first, I don't use add-ons. Doesn't mean a lot to me, but I have talked to some people, some of them on this call as well, about the add-on usage. And in general, my goal, and this has always been kind of the goal, is that there's no use of add-ons that that changes the intentional game design. And usually that kind of language, what I'm trying to say is, if someone goes in and they're teleporting across the arena, that's cheating, right? If they're doing stuff that is like breaking how the game works, that's just basically cheating in a way. And you get into some really gray area stuff, and this is why it sucks to have to like even think about it. But the big goal is when someone's clearing a fight, the tools they are using is not breaking the game in a way that's giving them that advantage. Does that sound like a fair statement, or is there anything that people are concerned about that?
I still think it would actually be like everybody would sleep better at night if the wording was entirely explicit and nothing was left up to interpretation. I know when we talked, our concerns basically boiled down to we want to use ACT and we want to use either NoClippy or Alexander. And I understand the reason behind leaving it a bit more generalized on multiple fronts, but boy, it just seems like it would be easier for everyone involved if it weren't, because I can just envision this scenario happening where, somebody uses something now and it's like, well, I don't feel like that
Mhm.
intentionally changes game design, right? But like other people are interpreting it as such, and it's just like now we're kind of back at square one, you know?
Yeah, I mean, uh, ideally, we're not putting explicitly we allow any kind of plugins or anything else. Because I know Square Enix isn't really involved in a race, and it's futile, you know, in a lot of people's opinions, for me to even care what Square Enix thinks. But Square Enix does make the raids, right? They do play a part in the overall raid scene in some way at all. So I don't want to like completely piss them off. It doesn't make sense to. But ideally, yeah, we're it's better safe than sorry in a lot of these situations. But now, if you guys are using like the nude mods or something, you're probably at a disadvantage anyways. You're not helping yourself, right? But if you're using like something, which brings into the debate of the recent issue where there's a little red dot in the middle of the screen, if that's something that should be concerning. And that sucked in the moment having to go through, because I don't keep up with add-ons, unfortunately. That's not, I don't do that. I have some people who will look into it for me. And once we found out what that little red dot snowballs into, and the kind of program they were using, that wasn't just like a little dot on their screen. It was more of giving the visual ability of exactly where you need to stand for all of your abilities, and being able to know the exact range of your abilities as well, just visually in front of you, which I think goes outside of the lines of what's intended for game design. We just made that call. And I don't know if you guys think that was a bad call or a good call, but it seemed like the best call I could make in the moment. And so I'm trying to prevent as much of those situations where we're having to sit there and debate that. So
Yeah.
if we're going to be like really close to explicit, and in that post, and I'll put this on here too, I go a little bit more into detail of kind of what we're trying to establish there. And it's basically, there's a bug in the game, and I've presented it. I mean, this is Square Enix knows, right? Honestly, I doubt they overlooked this, but there's a bug in the game that makes it to where I'm considering it a bug, at least, to where your actions can't be pressed due to latency issues, and it's fairly significant in rotations and overall damage. And if they do introduce a DPS check in the next fight, and people lose because they're just a little bit behind on DPS, it would suck not to allow at least that add-on that removes that clipping. And now, I don't want to list out the name of the plugins. You know, I don't want to point people to where to go for that stuff. But if that stuff is caught, I don't care. I don't think anyone really cares. It's if Square Enix comes out and says, "Oh no, that's not right. Okay, we're going to actually ban you," then maybe we'll care about that. But otherwise, I feel like that, as long with something that has been absolutely established throughout the years, ACT. Unfortunately, ACT, you can manipulate that or put more add-ons into it that give you more functionality than you should. But in the end, the ask in the guideline is that no one's really abusing that, and they're just using it for the logging, parsing concept of that. Again, these are just guidelines discussing, hey, what is everybody thinking fair? What should we go in with confidence that we're doing what is fair? That's what we're trying to establish. And then afterwards, if a lot of stuff comes out, that someone was doing something that seems to be broken, we won't feel bad about addressing it.
Yeah.
Does that seem fair?
I mean,
Yeah.
Go ahead, enough.
In terms of fairness, I think what I've spoken with most people on this subject, being able to use Alex or NoClippy is, most people I would say would agree with that. I've heard some people say otherwise, but most say that they would, only because if you don't, in many cases you are preventing a large subsection of players from even participating just because of where they live. I progged this tier on EU, did it the most no plugin way possible. It sucked. And it actually took us way longer to clear because of that, because there's just subsections where having 200 plus MMS makes it way harder than it needs to. But although at the same time, if you were to write down the more explicit thing, if I were you, I would probably write unmodified version of these applications.
Yeah.
Because the thing with Alexander that is a problem in some ways is that you can turn those sliders a bit too far to the side, and that causes problems. That'll end up making your GCD faster than intended, and then obviously that shouldn't be allowed.
Okay, then that I will. We can add that to language with it. All right. And so basically, the great thing about allowing ACT again unmodified in its base parsing format is that those logs are now able to be analyzed, right? And so if there is concern about it being manipulated, you can see that within a log. But I'm not going to require anybody to use it because again, add-ons are not allowed in the game in the first place. But I feel like at least on those two subjects, we can at least say, all right, well, we're not going to do anything unless Square Enix does. And I mean, it really comes down, and a lot of people have proposed, hey, just don't care. Don't do anything. Unless Square Enix makes a ruling on it, don't do anything, right? Which seems like a really good idea, but I don't know how much you guys trust Square Enix to moderate the world race and like say what is fair and what's not fair. People will, when things like that happen, unless if they feel like they have enough proof on it and there's enough community outrage, I don't believe anything's going to happen. And I feel like it's unjust to, or at least unfair to the players who are racing and everything else to just ignore it and turn a blind eye to it when there is actually evidence out there that someone is doing something that is unfair. I should remove them from the leaderboard even if Square Enix doesn't recognize it, because the community recognizes this stuff a lot better than Square Enix can sometimes. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but
Yeah, it's our responsibility to hold ourselves and each other accountable at this point. Like, things could change and they could decide to get more active, but we need to assume that they're not going to, because everything they've done, all of their actions say that they're not going to. So that's the only real logical assumption to make.
yeah.
I guess I should clarify very quickly. My concern isn't really your interpretation or your staff's interpretation of what does or does not constitute cheating. It's more so the element of interacting with the community. It's getting to the point where it's very, very exhausting to be involved in any of the public discourse about like, oh, who actually won the race? Because 50% of that discourse is now just like, well, did they cheat? Because this team used this and this team used that. And I want to be in a position where I can just kind of like point to the neon sign that says like, these things are allowed. We did this, so it's not cheating, right? So that's kind of where my point of view on this is coming from. But if the compromise has to be a bit more not explicit wording, like I do understand that, and that is acceptable.
Yeah, so I think the best way to word stuff that goes around like the Clippy part, and I don't know if you guys agree with that, but is more of, hey, if someone is latency improvement programs unmodified, I don't know. Well, I'll work on the wording with it, but ideally I'll have some sort of wording. I don't want to say straight up Alexander, because what if there's a different one out there, if there's something else happening, right? I don't want to promote just one add-on or point people in one direction. And what if the guy with Alexander suddenly said, you know what? If you're using another program, I'm going to restart your computer in the middle of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
You don't want to ever highlight specific names of add-ons.
And okay, in that case, I think we should, if you do want to whitelist add-ons, you should closely work with the program developers and make sure that like maybe they could turn on a tournament mode so that it better better complies with the unfairness that you mentioned. Because I think like automatically distrusting these people right off the bat sends the wrong message, saying that like yes, we want to use your add-ons, but like at the same time, like we can't trust you guys to like keep it fair, right?
I mean, there's some logic in that. I don't know how much the Alexander developers or Clippy or whoever else would be okay working with me on this stuff, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
You could
Also,
do that, but
I'm sorry. You could continue, Sindolf.
yeah, so you could do that. Although every group that I've ever been a part of has somebody in it who can modify those plugins themselves or write custom logic for anything they need. I've done it for fun, not during the race, but just for fun at times. I know other people who've done it for fun. Like that I don't think that would actually work for anyone who wants to cheat. to begin with.
I mean, yeah, end of the day, though, there's nothing we can do about that. If, like, we can establish our... Like, I feel like stuff like having a tournament mode, like, could be good in the world that exists, but, you know, if people are just going to go against whatever we decide here, they're just going to do it. And there's, like... Yeah, that's kind of outside the scope here, in my opinion, at least. Like, you're not going to stop people that really want to cheat.
Okay. I mean, like, I'll see if I can find some new wording. I'll put that as, like, just a task item for me, is to find the correct wording for those two particular things. Again, it comes down to the parsing logs, and it comes down to the latency reduction, such as no clippy, etc. And just the right kind of wording that everybody can feel confident with, at least.
Yeah. I did just want to, like, back up Calypso here, though, because I also agree. Like, any way that we can definitely outline, like, I'd be totally cool. My line was a little further along than just, like, ACT and latency reducing programs. But, you know, like our motto was just make sure nothing shows on stream for anything you're doing in the last race. But I do want to, like, make it more strict than that, and definitely if we can just say just those two, like, I use reactions so I can actually, like, buffer mouse overs, because, like, a big thing in my gameplay, but I can just turn those buttons into macros too if I have to for the world race. I don't really lose anything there, you know. So just like strictly making it only ACT and, like, only no clippy, like, I would be totally cool with that. And, like, we can write out some ambiguous wording so you don't have to name those plugins. But if that's the line, I feel like that's a very easy place to draw a line in the sand, to be like, just these two things for the race, guys.
Yeah. No, and I think that works good too. But if someone's like, they come on and they're like, oh, we caught this guy who is using something that helps with colorblind situations, or using something that just, like, we didn't mention it, but it literally has no change in the difficulty of the fight, we're not going to say this person's not eligible for the leaderboard. But if someone's caught with a program, and that program is obviously something that falls into the line of very clear cheating, then we will disqualify them. There has to be some sort of cushion for, because I don't, maybe I'm just super ignorant, but it's really hard for me to keep up with all the add-ons and how things are evolving with those. But I don't know. I feel like we need at least a little bit of cushion there for the ambiguous part of it. But ideally, yeah, the parsing logs, latency reduction, and past that, should be able to make easy ruling. But if someone's using something to change the color scheme or something like that, I'm not too worried about it.
Here's a scenario. So, like, you said ACT, that's okay.
Sure.
For logging purposes, what if somebody went into the, you know, funny triggers section and they added, like, just something that was calling out a ability that was happening on screen? How would you feel about that nowadays? Because that's been something people have used since, like, around Reborn, since 2.0. And it's in plenty of clears. Like, all the old ones, pretty much every group has that.
Sure.
But there's been, like, a little shift over time because, yes, people know how to read the logs now directly, and they can do more things that wasn't originally intended with it. So,
for me,
like, what's your thoughts on that, Howard?
Personally, for me, I use a raid leader to call out, or a raid caller to do it, so I feel, you know, scummy putting in a lot of opinion about that. It feels like an advantage, but I don't know. What's everybody's opinion? Do you feel like call-outs through ACT is something that is, you know, not bannable, but leaderboard removable?
I'd sure like to draw the line at you shouldn't be using any triggers whatsoever for the race. I think that's the cleanest way to do it. At the end of the day, like, nobody really gives a shit if you have something that says, like, battle litany in anime voice, but triggers as a whole would be such a pain in the ass to moderate, because if it's anything that hooks into a mechanic, then it is a really big deal. And I don't know that people are going to want to spend the time and energy to see, like, okay, does this specific trigger instance constitute cheating or not? I feel like in this case, it's easier to just say no, absolutely not. That goes against the idea of having an unmodified ACT install in the first place.
I agree. I feel like it would make my life a lot easier just to say no to that. I don't know what, again, anyone else?
Yeah, I am fine with completely blanket banning triggers.
Yeah, I agree. I agree as well.
With that.
Yeah, in current era too, we have analysts, we have really good shot callers. You know, anything you're taking away from players and putting in automation, I feel is just like, you know, that's a skill thing, and we should definitely like if your team has the capacity to call out, I think that should be recognized as an advantage.
I mean, would we agree with? I mean, pushing that into auto markers. Everybody's against auto markers as well.
Yeah, ban that from the game.
Yeah, that needs to go.
Yeah, 100%.
Get
All right.
outta here.
Lily banned.
All right, that's it. No auto markers. You got it.
Well, that's why my yeah.
From the game.
Yeah.
People were using it in top during live prog, so
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I let's just say that, and you know, when it comes down to it, we can tell people to stop using it, or see if anyone can you know work with us to comply on it if it becomes an issue, and then we'll dig into it then. But I think just saying no auto, going in with no auto markers, no triggers, will make probably the best experience for everybody.
Yeah. And I know you're like pushing the quality of life thing, but I really think I don't know if like the other teams agree with me, but I really feel like just hard making the cap, just base act, like no triggers, no nothing additional, and a latency program, and just making that it is like a really easy way to go. I don't know what like I'm not aware of like any quality of life anybody runs outside of that would like even be necessary. Like are there even colorblind things? Because I'm not like not aware of that and whatnot. I don't know if people.
there are. Yeah,
G-Shade, I guess. Depending
Yeah,
on the filter you use.
I mean, I use reshade on my own base game to help with colors because
I don't know if Reshade counts as an add-on to Square Enix. I think there has actually been discussions from Square Enix not really caring about Reshade. I could be wrong though.
Honestly-
explicitly stated he doesn't care about reshade.
Yeah, I would say anything that's like altering like game colors or whatnot, like I feel like we could make a fair call on that and allow stuff like that, because that's not going to impact the race in any way. But yeah.
I mean, if you're doing stuff that changes the model of the boss and removes their case.
Okay,
makes it
yeah,
better,
they're. Yeah, you make fucking
Small
the
mega boss.
beetle in top in phase 1 the size of a pixel. Yeah, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, I mean, I guess
Okay.
strictly speaking, if you're changing colors of the game and like what was the Phoenix? Those red that everyone hated. Yeah, I guess.
Mine as well.
I guess technically that's an advantage, but I don't care about that.
I mean, like if that happened, and then you have another like horribly visual like screen, I don't think anyone's going to be dinged for getting
Oh, that's fine. That's...
Okay, so I think those are the two like easy points to kind of go over. The other 2 points that I had are the ones that I think have a lot more discussion around it. The no data mine attempts made by members of a team or someone who is trying to support the team. And kind of what I wanted to do with this is just try to eliminate the annoyance of, you know, people being, I guess, personal data miners for teams, because data mine is going to happen no matter what, and it's going to be filled up immediately. I don't care if people use data mine content. You know, I can't really do much about that if it's all public and it's out there, because people are going to do it and they're going to release it. The issue that I always came into is if a team has someone who's just a really, really good data miner and they destroy the other teams because of that, that doesn't feel like a fun competition. Again, I'd like to hear you guys talk about it too, though.
In this case, oh, you can go. Sorry.
I was gonna say I think it's fine, but I think it's unlikely to actually do anything by putting that there. Like you probably put it there just for like because that's the intent. But most people that I know who do data mining, they're doing it secretively in the background anyway, and everyone's like, "Oh, just don't talk about it. Don't let people know that it's happening." Because there could be someone who they know who just brings out the full model of a boss fight. They go through a bunch of animations, like, "Oh, we know this boss only has 2 patterns because there's this many entries in the sheet, and there's only 2 animations, so you know ahead of time what the boss is actually going to do." You can guess it, and you can make a very good thing, but nobody, like a very good educated guess, but nobody's ever going to publicly admit to that. So I think you can put it there, but just know realistically that probably isn't happening for some people.
Yeah.
The main thing about this point in my opinion, is this: like, you have these data mine discords that are like, thousands of people in there, and there's a very good chance a lot of us are probably in those discords ourselves. So like, if this no data mining attempts should be allowed, right? You're just gonna get people who are like, oh, so and so is in the data mining discord, disqualify them, and it's just gonna be so annoying. Like, I understand the intent behind it, but that will 100% happen, and it's like very difficult to, properly moderate it, anyways.
That's actually my concern as well. Again, not so much I'm concerned that competition staff is going to have a real problem with this, but the community is going to be cringe about it. They're going to use it as this weird excuse to like try and quasi witch hunt people who maybe accidentally said the word data mine on stream, even when what they're referring to is something that got posted in that one Discord that I'm sure everyone in here is in. The most notable data mine Discord, and it's just going to be a mess, and there's going to be people who get upset about it. When at the end of the day, nothing that actually happens behind the scenes, as Sindolf said, is going to change, because I think he's entirely spot on with that prediction. So, to me, this might be something that is better left untouched for those reasons.
Okay.
I'm with Frosty here, because I feel like as teams, if it's stated, and like, we have the choice as leaders to bring a data miner onto our teams, and that's up to you. At the end of the day, none of us can moderate that. But I know if it's explicitly stated here, I should not have a data miner on my team doing specific stuff private to my team. I'm not going to bring that guy on my team ever, and just go from there. Anything that's out in the wild, the discords, you can't moderate that stuff. So that's just going to exist. People are going to see it. It is whatever it is. I don't care if other people of other teams are in those discords getting information from them. If it's public information, third parties do, it's whatever. But I feel like stating you should not have a data miner on your team, and there should be no work done by your team specifically to like unravel data mine information, I feel like that's fair game, and I like that.
Yes, and especially because there are going to be certain teams that have an inherent disadvantage because most of those data mines are in English.
It's true.
And Yuya wants to mention earlier about the ACT that it isn't just Lucrezia. Most Japanese people will refuse to use ACT in the launcher in the world races, and they don't want to upload logs either. And he thinks that should be considered. By the way, I am trying to translate what is being talked here to Yuya-san, and also I'm trying to get like his word out there. So apologies for the delays, but there's a lot going on on our end.
No worries at all, and I appreciate you assisting with that, because it is extremely important that we involve all regions, and especially like Lucrezia is a huge part of the world race, and we want to make sure they can get their word in too. And I feel like when we discuss those two programs we were discussing earlier, the ACT portion is something that I don't think people are ready to let go of. And while I commend everyone who doesn't use ACT, and I'm fully behind that, I don't think I can make a rule that completely eliminates ACT, because it's so ingrained within most of the world community for raiding. I think it is good to try to go in a direction that's away from ACT, but I'd like to I like other solutions to be provided by Square Enix before trying to make a ruling like that. And when we go into discussion for the other one about just the latency reduction, I know a lot of the JP community might not be affected as the same as like the Brazilian community or the other communities out there. So I know there are teams that may be playing JP that could go without that and be perfectly fine, but I feel like that in particular affects a lot more other regions out there, and that's the only reason that that's in consideration too.
Yeah, he hasn't commented on that yet.
Okay.
We're discussing that over, but
Okay.
yeah, just on ACT itself, I've just sent him over what you just said, so.
Thank you.
I want to make a note that people that live in South America, specifically on the southern part, like south of Brazil, Argentina, and other countries, there is no way for any of those people to get below 200 ping, no matter what data center they get, and they are always in disadvantage. without a ping plugin.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I live on the East Coast, and I can't play Machinist without hard clipping every single button during Heat Blast, so I'm playing in my own country, and I can't play the game. So I don't know what you want. It's like, it is what it is.
He is aware of the issues in NA. I've explained it to him before, so.
Okay.
Just for people to know, I'm gonna state this again just for the recording because the recording broke already, right? And I just started it again. But basically, we're all on, for the most part, on board with ACT, no plugins, no add-ons, just the parsing portion of that. And with the latency side, things are like NoClippy, things are like Alexander, that are just trying to get the game to a stable position for those who might be in a latency disadvantaged region. Those are things that we figure are okay for the world race so far in the discussion. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to reiterate that for if anyone's actually listening to the recording. I apologize for it breaking, but hopefully it should be good now. Okay, so back to the data mining part. I mean, a lot of it was discussed where it seems like there is kind of both sides of this, but I think in general, the best way to kind of reward that or reward it is that teams don't make a conscious effort to privatize data mining. And I think that might be the best way to say it. If people have someone on their team that is a data miner, hopefully that stuff is being pushed publicly wherever those are. Again, I don't encourage it, but I can't control it. And I don't feel like that's something until Square Enix makes a lot more moves on their side to control it, that we're going to have a full control on it. So I don't want to punish people for doing it. I just want to hopefully discourage people from actively forcing that out. And it seems like we're kind of at a 50-50 here, but I think most people are okay with at least saying, hey, we won't consciously bring on someone to privatize data mining. And if people do, they understand they'll be under some level of scrutiny for it, if that is brought to light, right?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, these are all just like handshake agreements between us. So, you know, people are going to do whatever they want to do. But officially, like if you're going to play by the rules that we think are competitive, you know, I feel like not having a data miner on your team is a fair ask. So.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the sentiment that's being expressed here. So we've never had a data miner on our team, and I don't want to have one either. Any concern I have is really just in the wording of this and how it's going to be interpreted by the community. So if we can put some care into that, at the end of the day, I don't have an issue with trying to state that, you know, privatized data mine efforts are against the spirit of the race.
Yeah, our efforts going up with Calypso, it's entirely on the wording so that like our players themselves don't come under fire just for like stumbling upon like a Twitter post or you know, being in the Discord.
Yeah, that to me is really not acceptable at this point because like it's bad, guys. Like it's, you all know how bad it is, and I'm really over it. So
me too.
Anything that can start that fire is not really in my eyes.
I get that, because if I don't want to have to like tiptoe during the race, and you had to do this a little bit in the last race, because if you're gonna like discuss certain things, even if it was like a totally public data mine, you can't like let that slip on stream, because you know one random person will find it and then put you under fire, and then your placement gets eradicated. So yeah, like maybe just like adding some verbiage of like, you know, discussing public data mines is fine, or I don't know, something like that. But yeah, I just agree with Calypso and Yoko that we need to be really careful with that wording.
A just quick example of that would be P8S with the Phoenix buff.
The Phoenix, yeah.
Everybody knew it existed, but they knew it existed because it was public. Completely, like people posted on Twitter, everybody knew there was a buff somewhere. And that would be one of those cases where people would then otherwise tiptoe completely around the subject. And unfortunately, that does give an advantage, because there are things people would not have tried as quickly as they did if they didn't know that it existed. But having a tiptoe around it would just be it would not be fun for the players, and it would also not be fun for anybody watching. And then half the community is going to be like trying to poke holes here and there. It's not fun for anyone.
Yeah, and it's always going to happen. I get it every single race. I mean, I had people tell me, I can't tell you how many reports I had of people using ultra wide monitors. You know, it's just what it is, right? Or they claimed they weren't using ultra wide monitor, but they were using a plugin on their computer to simulate an ultra wide monitor, and it just got really stupid. And so I'm always going to have to be at the tail end of this stuff and try to figure it out. The easiest solution is for me to say no add-ons at all and run with it, but that's not the fair solution to the community. I'm gonna have to just deal with the, you know, when some of the stuff comes up, what's the right ruling on it. And I'm hoping that this helps instead of being completely just whatever the community thinks, because if I just say that, then I have to go through that whole open debate every single time at the end of the race.
I mean, I think this 100% helps because I can just even tell you for like the last 2 races, like we're just like, well, I guess as long as we do this thing, we're probably fine. So having this discussion helps a lot.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go with that, and then I'm going to put kind of more of a, what I'll do is all 3 of these points so far is I'll make sure there's like a refined or more detailed explanation of them. And then put them publicly somewhere for all the teams here to kind of just know what we're aiming for, and that the community, Final Fantasy 14 community, can look at it and be like, okay, this is what he means by when he says this, or whatever, right? And I'll have you guys all kind of give your thoughts on it too, if you guys are good with that.
So,
yeah.
to clarify, there will be a draft of this guidelines before it is released to the public.
100%. You guys will have your thoughts on it to me, and then I will put it towards the public after everyone is pretty much in full agreement of how it's worded and phrased. And what I'll do is also get a Japanese translation as well. We have some amazing people helping me out that can do translations for me, and that way it can be available to the JP community as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you could help me too. I don't know.
I'm just using Google Translate right now. So.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. So the last one is probably the most contested. Go ahead.
To go back to some data mining stuff, I guess
Sure.
I have, some questions and clarifications in terms of like what qualifies as public. Like, for example, a lot of people in the race are streamers of varying sizes, right? Like, if you have someone in your Twitch chat who is a big fan and like data mine stuff and tells you it in your like 10 viewer Twitch chat, like, is that fairly a public data mine, right? Or do you have to like ban this guy? Like I obviously no one's gonna be asking someone to do this for them to like subvert the rules, I know, but like, you know, it's Twitch chat, like, what should we do in that situation, right?
I advise them not to. That's the best thing I can say, is when that stuff comes up, says, hey, yeah, thank you, but no thank you, and kind of move forward with that. Because just know the other teams are kind of doing that as well. Or at least in spirit, where that's the hope, is that all the teams are just saying, hey, yeah, that's fine. Don't need it, though. And there is a Discord, like you guys said, dedicated. That's considered public. If it's out on Twitter, if it's out on a website or something like that, where it's publicly known where data mining stuff will exist, that's public. But if it's like in a chat of 10 people or something, I mean, that's up to the people who are the person who's hosting the stream, right? To say, hey, look, this we need this to be a public piece of information. Don't just hand it to me. If you have something, just put it wherever is public. Again, I'd rather just discourage data mining in its entirety, but because we can't control it, that seems like the best way, is just to discourage people from trying to keep it private. Someone's going to probably message you, be like, hey man, I got this cool secret thing, and you guys just have to make a conscious decision on what's right or wrong, right? I can't really do too much about it.
Okay, but we can say, extrapolating it away from the Twitch chat example and kind of generalizing this a bit, we have an obligation to turn away information that is privately shared with us regarding data mines. Then that's what we're trying to get at here. Okay.
Yeah, more so it just make that conscious effort to discourage it and say no, right? And if it happens and you're like, oh cool, what else you got? That's a problem. But if you're like, okay, no, cool, but no thank you, that's the best response. Ignoring it's a great response too. But actually going out there and kind of actively accepting this stuff and kind of encouraging it, that's the problem.
I do have a question for this. So if we go through all these guidelines and we like try to push it away, try to ignore it, but we are still made aware of it, should we then, for the competitive and spirit of the race, share it with like this Discord or something so it is public?
I mean, that would be cool, but here's the other thing. Like, I don't want teams to be distracted and be thrown off by having to do these things when this stuff comes in front of them. Like, they actually have to, all right, well, now I've made this. Guys, let's stop raiding for a second so I can post it in the Discord. I mean, that would be awesome, but at the same time, it feels kind of wrong to, because when you guys are in race mode, that's all you're thinking about, right? You're just moving forward. You're not thinking about, like, helping other teams. You're not thinking about doing all that stuff. So I don't know if I could ask people to do that. I can say that'd be cool if people did that, so it wasn't a private thing. I know some people don't want data mining just for their own personal interest, and they don't want to be spoiled on the mechanics. And so I don't know if I want to put a channel dedicated to data mining within this one in particular, this Discord.
If I can interject, Frosty. I think there's no world you want your team presenting new data mine information in a public place, because that looks so bad. I feel like the only play here is to turn it down. Because if it's presented to you privately, and then you share it publicly, where did it come from? And then the community's like, well, this team's sharing data mine information. Obviously, they have a data miner on their team, right? I feel like you just turn this information away and you tell whoever's presenting it to you to do their own thing with it. Just don't involve your team.
I mean, that's probably the best way to handle it, yeah. I mean, and if you want to report it, that someone's coming around and they're doing this stuff, trying to, like, make a situation or cause some sort of drama, let me know and I can adjust.
Yeah, I feel like reporting it too is a much better look to the community as well. But yeah, I feel like you do not want your team name connected to sharing data mine information.
Yeah, I just want to know, because if someone just like drops a thing in my DM and I'm just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you can ignore it, delete it, let me know. Those are probably the best ways to handle it. Whatever in that kind of category would make sense. But I don't think that I don't want to ask people to have to go out of their way to do the right thing, if that makes any sense.
Nah, I mean, I feel like just ignoring it. I mean, you don't have to go to the effort of reporting people, but if someone just randomly drops something in your inbox, just don't read it. Just ignore it and move on.
And I know it sounds so it's so trusting, right?
I mean, we have to trust each other in the end, right? That's what this whole system is built on. Yeah, I mean, literally none of this works without trust. But, you know, I trust everyone here, so.
Even if it's not enforceable, just the fact that such rules exist will deter people from doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody here is invested. Like obviously we don't have every race team here, but like if you're here, you care. So, you know, I feel like that fundamentally is worth making these rules, and then other people can look at them and respect them. You know, hopefully everyone respects them. I know realistically not everyone will, but having the list in this meeting is a big.
Yeah. So I will probably extend this meeting a little bit longer than what I have previously scheduled, just so we can hit some of these other points. You were getting closer, like 12 minutes or so, but I'd rather give another 30 minutes of cushion, just so you guys know too. But going past that, we'll write up all of these and try to make it as clear as possible and present it here in this Discord and put it publicly where I can, what we think is right and the guidelines that we want to go with. The last thing that I had on there was the streaming portion, and it always, I get into this like mindset of just like, it's just so frustrating trying to keep up with this debate on what's legitimate or not and how to prove it and everything else. The streaming is an easy sell, right? It's like, hey, you're streaming, but I don't know if we this is the one I'm most flexible on, I think, in all these guidelines, is that the streaming portion, while if we're part of the streaming event, that's a no-brainer. If you're part of a streaming event and you're going to get rewards from whoever is sponsoring that event, you have to be streaming for it. When we go past that to just the overall race, though, which is kind of what we're discussing, at least right now, is that I don't know if we need to have it be just a full streaming, like one point of view full streaming, because I mean, people will argue that you need every single member to stream for it to be not cheating, right? I think that's stupid. I think having one member is great, but also maybe just having a full VOD of Prague is fine after the fact. I think that there is, if you just have only your clear, I don't know if that's enough enough information to scrutinize or go over and try to find the things that are off. If people really think there's something suspicious, you can't really do that with the last pull. But if you had the full Prague available on a VOD on YouTube or something after the fact, that will help. It's not going to prevent all scenarios, right? If one person is using something and they're not uploading their point of view, we're not going to be able to prevent that one person using an add-on and not showing it. I mean, again, we can't prevent that completely. We just want to increase the confidence in the community in the clears that are happening. And I'd like to hear what you guys think about that, about showing your Prague evidence and everything else, and if you think that should be a part of the guidelines.
Sorry, I have a clarifying question before we get
Sure.
into this. Is this about specifically the teams that are taking part in the streaming event, or is this for like getting on the quote-unquote leaderboard at all, or what?
Just the overall leaderboard right now is kind of what we're talking about. The streamed event will always be requiring a stream present.
Yeah.
But for the overall Mog Talk, just leaderboard in general, what I've been doing forever, what should there be evidence of the Prague?
I think the reality is that if you don't rank the non-stream teams, that someone else will. And if that's what you want, that's fine. Right, but the point is that there will be a quote-unquote real list out there of like when people reported their clears, whether or not they're streaming.
Right, and I mean, again, in that case, I don't mind if that's what it is. I've kind of gotten to the point of where if someone the issue is if someone clears and they just have a screenshot of their clear, is that good enough to justify being on the leaderboard?
Honestly, I guess my viewpoint here is that, like, Frosty, you run this event, and this is like this streaming event, and you know, like, specifically, I feel like you should just like not really care about that. Like you have your event, and you can just rank who won in your event, and then you're just kind of good. And we all want to participate in your event, and I like streaming, and I feel like this is a spectator sport at the end of the day, and winning it without any like spectators is kind of whatever. You know, I want people to enjoy our game in the community, but you know, maybe it's like outside the scope for you to care about like overall who won the race and whatnot. You know, that'll be on FF logs and people will know that. But for the streaming event specifically, we can have a first place and just all the teams that are competing under our guidelines, and we have that list, and then there's the other list. So
you think that Mog Talk should just have the one list instead of the two?
I mean, under the scope of what you're running, like, I feel like you have full say on what your list looks like, and then you can just be like, okay, well, this team didn't follow our list. But then, you know, like, FF Logs is always going to show the first log out there at first place of who, like, killed it. Although, I guess that's not true, because I think you talk with Kira, and you, like, got some removed. So I guess you have some pull there.
I didn't talk to Kira. I didn't get anything removed.
Oh, so, okay.
To be completely clear, I have talked to Kira before, but I don't control anything that's on his site, and I don't give him any sway.
Okay.
He does whatever he wants. In regards to the last situation we had with the last race, that was because there was no log uploaded.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know?
I'm making
there's
it.
no log for that team upload. They decided not to do it. So.
Okay.
And there was no evidence besides the screenshot, and that was it. Right?
Yeah. So So that's my standpoint though. Is I feel like if you just like limit your scope to just like your event and the stream teams, and then we just have that list, and then whatever else is floating out is whatever, you know. That's my viewpoint on it, at least.
Yeah, I think if you're okay with just having quote unquote your list, like this is a very reasonable like requirement to have in terms of streaming live. It's essentially kind of merging together more the stream event and the Mog Talk list per se.
Mm-hmm. But then even within your event, aren't there like teams who don't want to stream?
Yes, there are teams who don't want to stream still. Yes.
There's still okay, for example, this tier I had at one point tried to put a group together and said we're streaming. There are plenty of players who I've spoken to who are like, no, we don't want to do that at all. Like there are those who are not comfortable being on stream, or they found that they don't like the environment that it has brought to the world race, and that they'd rather just do everything themselves off stream. So those players still do exist, but they're kind of in the back burner now compared to everything that's so public facing now.
I mean, here's the big thing. It's like, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Real quick. I think there are two issues at hand. One is streaming versus not streaming, and the other issue is the Mog Talk list versus the whatever unofficial list. So.
I mean, like the world races started because I just took screenshots, right? I mean, it did start. Sorry, I don't want to, because I feel like this is something that absolutely isn't true. I didn't start the world race. All I did was put names on a list and organized the screenshots that were shared on Twitter or wherever they were, right? And tried to make some sort of conscious effort to create a list for the world race. And so those teams were already racing, those teams were already trying to be first, everything else. And so what I want to do is to still have that ability to let people be ranked whether they're streaming or not, but I want everyone to feel confident that the people who are on that list at least have some sort of evidence that they cleared outside of maybe just a screenshot. And so when I'm talking about rankings, this is what we've done in the past, is that we have the event, and those people are going to be rewarded for the people who are a part of that event, which requires streaming, but we also have just the overarching world race ranking sheet that I've been doing forever. And that one I guess I just have to make sure that people have confidence in that too. For example, someone doesn't upload logs, but they don't use any add-ons at all, and they clear first in the world. I think they should be at the top of the Mog Talk leaderboard, right? I don't think they should be required to use add-ons. I don't think they should be required to do really too much, but what would they be required to at least prove, they're clear?
Yeah. So
yeah, to be honest, with 2025 and expecting people to not have the recording of your clear is kind of much to not expect people to record it. Like all 8 people, not a single recording.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is more of not having a recording of the full prog versus just a recording of the clear itself.
But what I genuinely think is the entire thing is like whatever was said, it's built off of trust, and so I think we should give benefit of the doubt on the screenshot. If things look sus, if any sus is about it, request VOD, and if it's hard refused and all 8 players do not have a single VOD, then like whoever said, that's kind of sus, no?
I don't think that trust exists anymore in light of recent events, to be honest. I do hate to say that, but I think...
Well, trust between us, not trust with the community.
Trust between us is the problem. Like, that's not my concern, is the trust between the people in this room currently talking about participating in the streamed race. We're talking about trust between somebody uploading a screenshot of their clear that has no intention of engaging with the community at large. And I don't think there exists trust there in a meaningful capacity. So absolutely, I would say a full VOD of at least that clear at a minimum. I can certainly see the argument for requiring all of Frog, and I'm inclined to say that would be the best path going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I spoke a little bit, so this will be the last thing I say on this, but I feel like you're trying to do two things that kind of conflict with each other a little bit, because you're running like the stream race where we set a bunch of requirements, and then we have like winners of that. And in my opinion, that is the race, but then it's also like, but I also want to respect these people that didn't follow the rules we set and put them in the race, like in front of us, if they like are not streaming at all. And I feel like it should just, like, you kind of just got to lean into, if we're setting all these rules, your list should just be people that followed them. And, you know, that's just how I feel. But
I mean, like, so right now, what I'm envisioning is that any team that reports a clear and has any interest at least being listed on a leaderboard that I have any ability to control, they at least have to have just full prog. It doesn't matter if it's online, offline, whatever. there needs to evidence of their full prog listed somewhere, and then it will eventually need to be made public, not just stay private forever. I don't want to be the person who's responsible for going through all of their footage. It doesn't have to be made public immediately after the clear, but at some point within maybe the first few clears happen, then that full prog should exist like on YouTube or something and persist for a while to give people time to actually analyze it if there was some sort of concern with how they cleared it. Does that seem fair?
I think that's fair if you want to be ranked on the leaderboard, because you have no obligation to do so, right? You don't even have an obligation to do so even if you want to be called world first. You know, you have that achievement on Lodestone. Maybe Square Enix gets back to shouting out world first, whatever, and that's fine. But if you want to be on the leaderboard, I think that's a pretty reasonable bar to set. Like, hey, we need to see your prog to make sure that there's nothing incredibly sketchy about it.
Yeah.
I think it's very reasonable. I just don't think that you're going to get that many more people than the people who are already on the stream stuff, which I think is fine. I just wouldn't expect all that much from like teams that don't want to stream at all, who don't want to take part in like the event. Like, they're probably not going to go out of their way to do all of this to get onto a leaderboard run by you.
Yeah, well, I think like the big deal, I could be wrong, but most people who are successful in the world race want people to know they are successful in the world race, right? It's not like you do it and you're like, oh cool, I'm just gonna I got it first, cool, and then you just go on it with the rest of your life. Usually it's more of a public thing, and I think building public confidence requires more than just a screenshot. And so that's what I'm trying to introduce, and it really just comes into the question of, do I require them to only have a clear of their last pull? Do I require them to have a recording of the full prog, or do they have to be streaming the whole time? And I think the streaming part, which I listed on there, I want to dial back to just a VOD of the full prog.
At least the VOD of the kill pull. At least, like bare minimum, I think.
I think you should have full prog.
I agree with full prog.
Another thing. There's no reason not to. We actually did it. We were the team that did that. There's no reason not to.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're not going to have show your processes on your computer, but you know, at least have the full prog, because usually
full
in
voice as well. You can't hide voice.
I don't know about full voice. Is the only thing, because I feel like that. I know what it provides, but I feel like people will get really uncomfortable with that. It would be nice to have it, but I don't know if I want to make it a disqualifier for not having it. But I don't know what you guys think too.
This kind of leads in.
Spoken to...
You can go. I talk a lot.
I have spoken to people in the past who've said that they didn't see a difference between streaming and releasing a full prog later, because what a lot of people are typically worried about is everything they say is just permanently recorded then. And sometimes in prog, tensions run high between players and they get into arguments, and to have that out fully in public is just not... some players are not okay with that type of thing. So, I mean, I see them... It is still a hard sell to not have full voice and everything there. Because I agree with Suki and others to a degree, but that's just a concern that I've heard over time.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. This is a very difficult decision to make, because I see so much potential for abuse with other things that are otherwise completely unmoderatable, namely like ACT voice triggers, which have such a history of being leveraged in the race to provide a very significant advantage. Because it's not like some kind of made-up scenario, like what-if thing. This has been a habitual problem, and I want to have some way of mitigating this. I guess the counter-argument there is that it would be quite trivial to just not have your ACT audio captured anyways, so what does that really provide?
Yeah.
I think a solution for this. It should be two bots. One public bot that you can release without the voices and without anything else, so you can protect yourself as the world racer and your team on whatever happened on that prog. But we as the Mock Talk team, we should have one with everything on it. And then we can say, yeah, we kind of review the bot entire proc, kind of, because I don't know how we're gonna do it. But say, yeah, they didn't use ACT with triggers, or they didn't use someone using ACT on their other computer or on other team, making triggers to the rest of the team, or stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the
I don't
best
know.
that
if
you can moderate, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice, and it would build confidence. I don't know if it should be a requirement, but maybe a suggestion.
And here's a little, I suppose, devil's advocate for the Empire pool prog. How are you proposing that we actually give you these prog bots? Because unless you're, well, that goes back to the streaming issue, right?
I mean,
if you're
sort
just
of.
streaming on private stream, then some people don't do that. Some people's internets can't really handle full streaming during prog, right? But recording is not really a big issue. But these are going to be like hundreds of gigabytes of files, right? So how would you propose you actually see these like files?
You're telling me there's not a single person on your team who's going to be privately streaming on YouTube?
And it saves it automatically anyway.
Yeah, I kind of.
If there's not a single person on your team doing that, then I don't know what you're doing.
You can't like want the world to acknowledge that you won and then have not a single person on the team record anything of your gameplay. Like,
yeah, but what I'm saying is that rather than the full prog, why not just the clear?
Mostly because if someone really wanted to investigate, you can tell a lot from full prog and like the advancements they make in certain things and like the mechanics and everything else versus if you look at just the VOD, you'll just see what they were able to do in the end, not how they got there. And how they got there is a super telling part of if there's something suspicious or worthwhile to look at. And
it's transparency in the end, right? Like that's what we want.
I mean, ideally,
putting
is
up
that
a clear video, there's no transparency there.
There's a big difference from the clear poll.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you see the clear poll and everyone does this one mechanic that everyone's getting tripped up perfectly, and you're like, oh, okay, they've obviously invested hundreds of polls. But then you look at the ProgVod in poll 2, they're still instantly perfectly doing this. And then you're like,
yeah, I think that's good. I think ideally that full prog does become available in some way after the clear. Seems like the best decision. It would be nice if I could just do the last clear, the last pull and everything else, but I feel like the confidence would be severely increased if there was full prog. So I think that's the decision, at least right now, that we can go with. And if we find that people are having issues with it before the race starts and it's actually worth a discussion to further that, then we can get into it. But I feel like most people are going to be okay and at least have one member on their team that has the ability to record their full prog. And I could be wrong, but I think we should try and see if any issues actually come from it.
Would you also be okay with supports recording for the team too, if there happens to be like literally no one that can like pull this off?
Yeah. I mean, if they want to do it, I mean, if they want to stream to Discord and then just have someone like pull that, I guess. I don't know how that would work, but yeah, supports could provide that. I don't think there'd be any issue with it.
It's pretty easy to do that. Having a night record it would be a non-issue. You can get voice. You can get just Discord audio that's not voice.
No. Okay. So I am going to dial that back to allowing teams to not be live and be able to kind of just record that and just be able to present their full prog when they're done and they claim they're clear. Would make sense. And again, I'll post the more detailed information, and you guys can discuss on that kind of ruling later. I guess in the next few weeks or so, we'll post those up. Okay, so trying to not go too much. That seems kind of settled. I do want to talk about the overall stream event. I know that affects a lot of people in this call, but not everybody. But I feel like everybody would have an opinion on it. The streaming event is, again, different than just the overall world race. It's where we raise money for charity, where everyone kind of comes together, and this big community event, so we can highlight the race for the people who are comfortable streaming it live. Now, I do want to say we are going to be changing up the charity. I'm going to push for it one way or another. I don't know if we will be working directly with Echo or not. Again, that hasn't been completely clear, but I'd like you guys to put your opinions in on your thoughts of Mog Talk doing its thing versus working with a partner like Echo. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I have one request, and I'm pretty sure you didn't do any of this anyway, but you have a pre-built list of every single stream that every team is running. I want that to be publicized, because I doubt you gave it to Echo, but in a world you did, it's just an huge advantage for analysts, because one of the big first things they have to do is figure out like all the different streams that all the other people are running, and in this day and age in the stream race, a big thing is your scout analysts. So if you are going to be working with someone and you have Echo stamped on your name, just in the statement of like being fair, I want any information you have that is an advantage that Echo might use and we don't know, is publicized for everybody to leverage.
I didn't really think about that, to be honest with you. And I mean, the production team on Echo had it for sure because they were controlling the production.
Yeah, that's a big advantage in terms of, like, our analysts would love that list. That's my only statement if you're gonna have an official partner,
So I guess this is another question. Would you, if say for example, Echo was racing or let's just say we're working with a partner and they don't have a team and they had that list, would you rather that list be private? Like, if it was only in the production's hands and not available to another team at all, would you rather that list be completely private, or would you rather it be public?
Well, you make some. What do you ever do with that list anyway? Like, because it is a tool for like people that are just curious about the race to also be able to quickly scan it and like find a stream they want to watch of like a specific player and stuff. So I feel like from your.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, it feels like publicizing that in like a certain nice way with your like staff for like anybody watching the race to easily find a stream of someone. Like, I think Sindow, let's just say for example, Sindow's like my favorite player on the world, and I just want to watch only Sindow. I can really quickly get to that.
Yeah, so. it would actually be nice even for non-competitive purposes, because especially for the people that stream on YouTube as opposed to Twitch, you're inherently less visible. It would just benefit everybody to have that be public.
Okay, so I think that isn't a problem. I think most teams would be okay with their teams being listed, I guess, on a public list somewhere if they're streaming. Again, that is only for the event in general. It's not for, like, if teams are doing offline streaming and everything else, you're not going to be able to see their stuff anyways, right? But this will be for everyone who's streaming. We can put that list public if you guys all feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay. All right. So, again, working with Echo versus not working with Echo, working with a partner versus not working with a partner. I know there was a lot of comments on the ad intensity, but to do the kind of production I think Echo was doing, it requires finances that require ads like that. So if the event went in that direction to where we're doing in-person stuff and everything else, I'm sure there has to be some way to pay for a lot of that stuff. And I just want to know after that event if you guys had any thoughts or feelings on how it went versus previous events.
I was an analyst, so I watched a good amount of the Echo stream. And I don't think ads were necessarily bad. I just think that the production team had a tendency to cut away from like a team at the prog point to either show another team further back or show an ad or like sell displays or something, right? And I understand that there's a necessity for these ads and these interludes. It's just like the timing. I think people would care a lot less if the timing was less annoying, right? Like, if I don't know, Lucretia is about to reach the prog point with a strategy that they cooked up that might be new information, like, it's extremely annoying to then cut to Jeeth selling displays. And I like Jeeth and I like displays, but as a viewer, that's like extremely annoying.
And there's some learning curve that comes with that and the finesse with it. I know Twitch ads, they don't allow you to really time it properly unless you turn off the automated ads and then you lose a decent cut of the ad revenue.
I mean,
once you
I think
turn
as
it off.
a viewer, if you get like blocked by Twitch ads, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Like buy a sub or like watch another stream. But like
Mm-hmm.
Echo's production controls when they do their internal cutaways and how
stuff,
they how they control, you know, which team they're watching at what time and which, you know, what when they're doing their own ads. And it did feel a little bit amateur at times, in terms of like how the stream was being managed, in terms of, you know, we're going to cut away to another team now, or like, and I don't think it was even necessarily a favoritism stuff, because I don't have the details anymore, but I recall this happening to Echo as well at some point, where they were like about to reach a prog point and they cut away to something else. So I think there's just room for improvement in terms of production on that front.
But no preference, partnership or no, in that.
I mean, these events are expensive. Obviously in a perfect world, you know, you'd be 80 people in a Borg mind and just run it all yourself. But you know, it takes money.
Yeah.
Does anyone know how the on the World of Warcraft side, how do they approach to this issue? Like I think we can pretty much learn from that, right?
I mean, the World of Warcraft side is a different beast entirely. I'll be honest with you, the world race is different completely too, in a lot of ways. The pacing is completely different. I think they've only had a couple instances where they're neck to neck. Huh?
Just this specific issue about, you know, when the acts are gonna play.
Oh yeah, it's
well,
different.
So with WoW, each team runs their own event, right? So they know exactly when their own team has downtime, when they can run ads, blah blah blah. But also there are, I don't pay as much attention to WoW, but I do see complaints online that sometimes, you know, their ad runs during like critical times, and everyone in Twitch chat starts complaining or whatever, right? So
weird.
Screenshot.
A little bit of production background. At the end of the day, it's gonna come down to the people who are actually pushing the button. Like they're gonna have full information on who's where at what. It comes down to them pushing that button at the right time. And it's a combination between, okay, our casters have been talking for an hour and a half, and people are consistently getting to the point. You just got to run the ad so they have a chance to get some water or trade out or whatever, and it's keeping that flow. It's not a perfect science, and obviously this is probably what I think the second time they've ever done something for FF, especially when you're looking at everyone as opposed to one team, because obviously, like in Echo's case, they pull and then they talk for 20 minutes. Okay, it's a perfect time to take a break, run ads, go again. Liquid, full, they do the thing consistently, and so there's a little bit of a learning curve. I didn't think it was that egregious, and I thought they were at least not completely cutting away at awful times. So yeah, it could be better.
There could be improvement.
Yeah,
but I will say, Frosty, after that, if you want to keep going, sorry, I just want to say something after.
No, go ahead, Seiji.
I have the unique position of being on the like caster side of looking at things. I will say at the event, what I noticed, there was a lot less Mog Talk people on, like, it was the majority Echo taking over the time slots where people were actually watching, which is understandable considering they were the, you know,
on site.
But like, yeah. But like, it was kind of like, you do have a lot of people in that you built up with the Mog Talk community, like the casters and stuff, and them having to take the graveyard shift every time is kind of like,
Right. I mean, and that's part of what I've been pondering on, and these kind of decisions, everything is that this has been built up as just a fun community project in general, right? It's not very profitable. It's never been very profitable for me, to be completely honest. But the idea is that this is something for the Final Fantasy XIV community, and I want it to progress. And I think, you know, people with experience and kind of the ability to do things that Echo can do is really great. But that doesn't mean that it is like the perfect solution for what the community needs. And some of the proudest things I have about the race event that we put together is really some people got their start from that, and they are professional casters now, right? They're out casting other places, and that was because Mog Talk was able to be a platform for them.
My
and this
also
kind of
biggest
eliminates
question.
that a bit. Yeah.
My biggest question: how much less stressful was it for you to let Echo have the reins versus you?
Tons.
Yeah, that's what I want to know, because
Yeah.
I feel like if it's easier on you, because I've seen you giga stressed because you're running literally everything and you have a kid, like maybe I think partner's okay.
Yeah. Well, I will be honest. The Anati production team is pretty much sold and just being a partner in this happening.
They're goats.
And so while I need to make sure there's financial compensation for them, they are pretty flexible, and they more than anything just want to help out, and they're okay helping in either scenario. And so I don't know, I want them to constantly be involved because they're super professional too. They work with CS:GO tournaments and stuff like that. And so I do. It doesn't matter to them either. They're involved a lot more if we do this unpartnered, of course, and we're able to get more community involved. I think that's the biggest takeaways from it. And I haven't talked to Echo about like what they would want to provide for this upcoming race or not. But I think I really do want to make sure that we are still keeping a focus on the Final Fantasy XIV community as much as we can. And the problem with that is that a lot of financial parts fade away. Sponsors are so hard to get, and now probably even harder. But what we do have, I think, in a good plethora of at least, is awesome artists within the community who would be willing to help and support the event as well. And they could provide rewards. Like I think Kindred was most excited about the hoodies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I would have also been most excited. I think you guys did something similar for Anabasios. You had a character portrait.
Yeah, character portrait.
That was the number one thing I was interested in as far as like winning from a rewards perspective. So absolutely.
Like everyone has a keyboard.
Yeah.
Would it be prudent to take a GDC approach?
I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of the model that I've been kind of going off of for the most part. Is the GDC approach and getting donations of gifts from artists and people who did stuff. And it means less products for the winning teams for the stream event, in terms of like headsets or mice or keyboard or chairs. But you could get some cool custom made stuff from the community, I think.
Yeah, I don't think anyone cares about. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think anyone needs headsets or chairs.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's not a thing against the sponsor, because I think the sponsor is fantastic. Like I think what was it, Corsair? Corsair's a fantastic.
Corsair, Elgato, Secret Lab. Yeah.
I mean, Elgato is a different thing, but at the end of the day, it's like people already have keyboards and mice, because otherwise, how are they playing? But
Okay. I mean, that's something I
too.
That's it. That's it. If you're gonna take that approach, let me know, and I'll see if I can get some cross stitch, like 8x11 put together.
Okay. Yeah. Wait a minute. You'll do a cross stitch award for the winning team?
I don't know. I have to figure that out.
Okay.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, money in general. I mean, sponsors also help provide money in Subway, right? And but we can also utilize Twitch's financial way to handle that too, which is through ads. And as a community-based thing, I can let the community decide on what the ads are, right? And what that means financially on our side. And without that money, we can't pay casters the same, but casters usually are okay to volunteer too. But I don't want to take away the opportunity for them to have a payday. All right, even if it's not a lot, it's something. And so a lot of these are big factors. And it sounds like in general, you guys don't have a huge preference over it. Just either way, we try to improve on what we did before.
So
yeah, I think that's go ahead, Sandal.
So I hadn't really been able to watch much of it because I'm usually playing instead. But with this type of thing, I would personally prefer it if you were able to keep everything more like grassroots community, but I know that's not realistic. Mainly for financial reasons and because of time reasons, especially with the amount of stress that it puts on you. So I think that you should try to go a middle ground by going partial corpo, but also this is one way to put it. But
yeah,
similar to what Seiji mentioned before, I would say try to at least include some of like community as like shoutcasters or any analysts you want to bring on, or whether you're doing it in person or a digital event, because being able to include people and bring others on, it helps bring more people in to this feeling of like, yeah, this is the event that the community's putting on. This is them. Like people can get into it. Like there's an entry point. There are individuals that people usually recognize, things like that. It ends up, I think, just being a better feeling overall, a better vibe.
Right.
But
I mean, even if the casters aren't the best, if they're part of the community, people are happy they're there, right?
Yeah, because I've seen some others where like I've spoken to people who are like, an organization will say, here they're caster, and it's like, do any of them even play the game? It's like, yeah, but they can be entertaining and like, hold a conversation, which is still very important. But I know it turns a lot of people off because it's a mixture of, do they even know what they're talking about? For those who care about that sort of thing, and do you even know who they are? And then at some point, it just feels like it's not the community event anymore.
I feel like that's extremely important to me, to be honest with you. This being a community event and less on becoming like a major esport, just making this a major community event for people who are passionate about it.
So
yeah, but to be clear,
yeah, sure.
To be clear, I'm not saying don't partner with Echo again if they give you an offer or anything. I think you should, but it's just how I think you should approach it.
Okay.
Yeah, so but to counter this, right? I watched the whole thing. I actually thought like some of the Echo casters were like they actually knew more about what to talk about than some of the Final Fantasy casters, just because they were more.
For sure.
Just because they were more
experienced. Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Reading and knew what they were talking about, even though this is not their main game. So I think like it's good to have more community. From Final Fantasy, but they need to know what they're talking about, right? They need to be good casters in the first place, and that should be a bigger focus in my opinion.
Bigger focus on better casters than community?
It's a mixture of both, right? But I think more people would prefer better casters from what I've seen.
Most just your normal viewer, for sure. I think like the average viewer would prefer like the better entertainment and everything. But the people who are part of the community would rather see the community member they've been following forever, right, be up there and try to do their thing. So it's difficult. It's really difficult to do, but I think it's worthwhile to find the right balance in there. So okay, I do want to say a huge important thing to me, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's something that is kind of the charity we go for. And we have been doing Extra Life, and we've done the one from Echo, which is kind of like Extra Life. But with the state of everything, I think we're going to be moving towards, I don't have it completely confirmed, but more in the direction of something like the Trevor Project. I think it's what we're going to be supporting for the future events and everything. Because I feel like that's, with the political state in the world right now, it feels like it's the right decision. I don't know if you guys care or have a big opinion about it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Good choice.
I think it's at the moment probably the right choice, and especially really important to a lot of people out there. So I that's kind of where we're going to go for charity wise, is try to be a little bit adaptable towards just what's going on and what really needs help. And I feel like the Trevor Project will cover that pretty well for right now. But okay. Does anyone have any questions or want to say anything before we get off the meeting today? I feel like this was a really good discussion in general, just to go over all this and get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I have one final.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. I have one final clarification I wanted to make in terms of like the rules of the race, and it came up a little bit in VODs with like full audio and whatnot. But when you're like number one and you're seeing like a mech for the first time, it's pretty standard practice to like mute your mics and whatnot to like hide at least your discussion of how to solve the mech, and obviously people can still watch. But you know, are you okay with that and whatnot?
100%. Like I've never required audio. I think audio is good. It adds a lot of production value. But we have commentators, at least on that side, if we're talking about the event in general. But in their VOD reviews and everything else, just requiring audio is a very touchy subject. And I think if we can at least start with just doing the visual, and if it becomes a thing to where we think audio has to be required in the future, maybe. But right now, no, I don't think audio should be required. Unless if you guys are completely against that kind of ruling, but I feel like that is fair to just leave audio where it is right now and to whatever people want to do with it.
Okay,
and I feel like it is against the competitive spirit, to be honest. Although I understand your rationale for being uncomfortable requiring it, but it does, you know, muting your streams to discuss seeing a new mechanic does seem kind of diametrically opposed to what we are fundamentally trying to do with the community event, which is to have a transparent race experience where the community gets to follow your problem-solving process and feels like they get to witness it as more than like a distant spectator. So, you know, if we can't do that for 7.2, like that's fine, but I would like to see that evolve over time to an expectation that, yeah, you're streaming your comms and you're showing your problem-solving process to the stream.
My only
teams actually agree.
Yeah, I
copy each other.
I mean that. Yeah, I mean, my only counter to that would be sometimes there's things that you want to mute that aren't related to the race, so that it's like a little gray area of like min-maxing that.
That's true.
Yeah, but I agree with you 100%. Like, the other one thing I wanted to get clarification on is during, I don't think this will be a Savage issue, but like during FRU, we went dark at one point because we were on crystallized time and there weren't much of anything there, and then we like didn't get there again while we were dark. So that was a meme. But I assume going like dark to like hide information would be like a disqualification from the streaming event.
From the streaming event, yes. So people have done that before and not fully understood, you know, why not to do it. And I talked to them and they went back live, and that's fine. Because there's just confusion there. But if you're intentionally like doing that and you know you shouldn't do it, then that's an issue. So yeah, I honestly just don't go dark for the streaming event. Of course, if with the, you know, the VOD portion, people who are doing the offline prog, as long as they have their full prog, it doesn't matter in the end. But like the people who are part of a streaming event, the expectation is that if they are progging, they're streaming it.
Okay, thanks. Those are the two things I just want to get clarified.
Yeah, no problem. What else we got?
On that going dark thing, you're saying we're not allowed to go dark? You wouldn't let us go dark?
Not if you're in a part of a streaming event, no.
Like if we don't care about the rewards of the streaming event, like, you know, just
then yeah, I mean that's you. As long as when you're done, you have full prog.
Yeah, you have the exactly. At the end, as long as you have the full like YouTube VOD or whatever.
Yeah, fine. If you're not part of like the streaming rewards and everything else, I don't care. But if you're part of the streaming event, yeah, you need to have the stream up the entire time.
Okay.
Any other questions?
My team want to bring up a problem about language, because so as a team which was composed entirely Chinese players, we do get a bit of a disadvantage because we look at texts that aren't our first language, and we are thinking if it's possible that we patch the texts and still be qualified for all these, you know, rays or streams.
So let me get a clarification on what you mean. You mean that you have a plugin that changes the text and translates it to you to a Mandarin or equivalent?
Yes.
I don't think there's any issue with that. That seems like a quality of life thing that doesn't really change too much. I mean, you can make the argument that NA language had it harder in like Nail back in the day, right?
Larboard.
Yeah. But I think languages are going to be different no matter what. But I mean, if it's not a language that's available and you change it to Chinese, I don't think that's a big deal unless someone else thinks that's an issue.
Because it was never in the official. It was never in the official program. It's something we have to add in with some kind of script add-on. So we really want to clarify that or make it documented that it's allowed, so we can.
As long as it's not like saying stuff like here's the mechanic, right? You're changing it from like RP words, whatever they're doing in the actual fight, but you change it to kind of a sign of triggers or something like that. That would be an issue. But if it's just like changing the language and translating it, I don't see if there's an issue there because that's the same across the board already.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
That's great.
If someone's probably going to ask about that at some point, if it actually becomes like a group that wins, then you should probably at least be able to source which language it was translated from. Because whether you do the Japanese or like the English, it's going to be vastly different output, most likely. Just because English is very stylized.
True. In that, on that regard, I think in the past most of the translated add-ons, the translating add-ons, kind of follows the spirit of official Chinese translations. So if that does follow the official Chinese translation spirit, I guess that should be fine, and we can. Mostly I just want us to make it like documented, so like add a rule that this is allowed or something like that. Because as we're talking
quality
about
of life.
What kind of
that does fall kind of in the regards of if you're making it easier to developers who are intending to make it right. I know that makes it super gray, but that doesn't make it easier than what the developers intended, I would assume.
Right.
And that comes up into interpretation. And if we really get in a gray, sticky area where like I don't know what the right call is, I'm fine bringing apart the people who need to make that kind of decision just together. Most of the time that these situations come into play, the other teams are extremely generous with their interpretation on what's cheating or not to say if a team is okay. So I feel comfortable, like if there comes a point where something that we haven't discussed comes up and it's something like the language or something, and we're like, oh, we don't really know, I feel comfortable asking everyone who is racing if they think that is fair or not. I think most people would say that is fair. I could add that language in there a little bit more, just localization. That kind of goes in the same thing with latency, just making sure it's inclusive to all regions. If it gets translated to Mandarin or Cantonese or whichever, is perfectly fine.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question. It's kind of related to the sponsors thing.
Sure.
So Frosty, what's your like plan and like thoughts with regards to the Square Enix side of things?
Oh, they will never sponsor an event that I can think of. I would love them to be a part of it. But yeah, if you're asking if they will ever sponsor or be involved in the event, they are always welcome. But unfortunately, I think their stance prevents them from being a part of it.
So there's not going to be like any involvements or any connections even whatsoever.
Square Enix has not reached out to me. And
do you plan to go in that direction at all, or like?
I would love to, and so I do try to like reach out when I can about the world race and trying to get Square Enix, and behind the scenes I do try to make conscious efforts to like get them more involved and be a part of it. So that is true. But for them to be involved, they have to take in my requests that I have given them seriously, which is fix the latency issue and to create a public log or something that would be available for the community to not be criminalized for doing things that are basic for most raiders. So Square Enix has to talk to me about it, and right now they aren't. So I know they care about the race. I know they're they want it to be a success, but until they kind of change a couple of things on their end, they're not going to be able to be a part of it. But yeah, I do want to include them if they could be. I don't know to what extent, but I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, because like it's pretty different if you plan to go in that direction versus not. That's
yeah. If Square Enix got involved, most of you guys say Square Enix said, "Hey, we are going to be involved in the world race. Here are our rules." Would you guys say okay and just race under their rules?
It just depends. It opens everything up to renegotiation. Like would I potentially be willing to give up ACT and stuff? Like, if they're considering an alternative, like absolutely. But, you know, as you said, it requires them to kind of take that first step, and I don't want to make the worst first mover penalty of all time.
Mm-hmm. I think what we set is fair in terms of overall trying to respect Square Enix and trying to, keep this thing for the community, because, we would say no add-ons at all, and Square Enix would be super happy, but that's an unrealistic decision to make for the community.
Because like, can they do like pretty simple things, and that would help us a lot? Like, let's say
Yeah.
they do like Twitch drops, for example, and it's not even
Twitch
they don't even
drops?
include us. I don't know how that works, but like, for example,
Yeah. I mean, it would be great for them to do that, but any official support for the race means that they support what we're doing. And now that we're kind of, outline, this is kind of why I try not to put names in a lot of the guidelines and everything else. But when we say, hey, we're not going to we'll take action to whatever Square Enix says in these cases, unless the Square Enix enforces it, we're not going to do anything about it. That is probably the best way to keep them involved in some way. But I feel like that is still too much for them, and they wouldn't want to be involved with it. But maybe I'm wrong. I will always keep that communication up with them, and if they can try to provide a solution to be involved, and they will add Twitch drops by saying, hey, no add-ons. I mean, during the streamed event, the goal is that no one that is presenting a stream shows any add-ons or anything. That is my request to everybody that is part of the stream event, is try to keep those streams clean. You could be using ACT, whatever. Just don't have that on screen, right? We won't penalize you for that stuff again unless Square Enix does. But if you keep that off screen, at least that provides a maybe a safe platform for Square Enix to maybe be involved someday. But I don't know. Any other questions? Okay.
I'll say another point.
Sure.
So like this talk has been, I think it's really good, right? But I also know that there's like most people here like are within like the top 10, top 15 competing teams. And I think that's only one side of the community, right? There's a lot of people, like a lot of viewers that are not here, right? And just want to know that their voices aren't heard in this discussion.
Not in this discussion. This was meant for just the teams to give their voices and everything. Because, 100% the race wouldn't happen without the most competitive teams being a part of it. And so I want to make sure that I'm listening to what you guys are feeling, kind of what's out there from a competitive standpoint. A lot of people who view the race don't have the same perspective you guys have. But that doesn't mean that I close the discussion off completely to people who don't race and are in the top part of the race, right? That is still, all this is going to be public, and their voices will be heard once we give the revised guidelines out there. And so I'm not like cutting off the communication or only listening to the top teams. I'm still talking to them, but I wanted to put a narrowed, time slot for us all to come together where the top teams are putting their voices out there. But yeah. Okay. Well, I need to go. I have a daughter that would like my attention right now. But I will get this recording. Again, we missed the first 30 minutes or so. I'll get that into a chat later today, so people who weren't here can listen to it. And if you guys, please message me, talk to me, whatever you guys want about your thoughts on any of this or anything else with the race, and I'm more than happy to discuss it. Use this Discord to talk to each other. It's still open to any teams that want to participate. I'm assuming a lot more activity will happen as we get closer to the race with the Discord in general. But the whole point of this is just so we can do things like this and make sure that we're all on at least the same ground for what we want out of the race. All right. Guys, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, unless there's some last-minute emergency thing somebody has to say.
Have a good day, Frosty. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Frosty.
Yeah, of course.